Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Unbridled Equestrian Podcast. If you are a curious, horse-obsessed type, someone who wants to improve your knowledge, skills, or connection with your horse, or just understand the challenges that you might be facing from a different perspective, then you are in the right place, because that's what this podcast is all about. I'm Katrina, and this is my sweet baby angel and co-host Tigger. She's going to be joining us today. I am a rider, former coach, current saddle fitter, and owner of Highland Saddles, as well as the founder of Lovas Equestrian. And I'm still basically the same horse-obsessed girl that I was when I was a little kid. My equestrian journey started almost 30 years ago. And I have to say, on the obsession front, not a lot has changed, but on the knowledge front, almost everything has. And that's really what sparked me to start this podcast. I'm so passionate about educating riders and advocating for horses. So I'm here to open up some interesting and enlightening conversations with a variety of equine professionals. Conversations that might change the way you view an issue or approach an issue that you might be having with your horse, and conversations that can offer some support and tools that might help you to overcome some of those challenges that you're facing at various stages of your equestrian journey. Because I think if there's one thing that we can all agree on, it's that this sport is tough. You know, I want to make it easier and shine a light on things that I hear people struggling with. And I know that chances are, if a lot of the people I'm seeing day to day are struggling, you might be as well. And sometimes the answers we need in this industry aren't necessarily the ones that we're getting in our current situation. And it's not necessarily because our current team doesn't care. It's just because there's so much more to know, and a lot more than most people care to admit. And so if you've ever felt like you don't have the answers you need to advocate for your horse, or if you're just feeling stuck, come along with me, because I'm going to follow my passion for learning and continue to expand my knowledge base by bringing you expert speakers from the industry who you can learn from too. So a little bit about me. My lifelong horse obsession actually started with my older sister, who began riding long before I was able to. And I would tag along to the barn with her every chance I got. And I begged and begged my parents to let me start riding lessons. And finally, when I was 10, I got it. They said yes, and I had won. The caveat being I needed to find my own way to and from the barn. And I thought, that's fair. They didn't want to be my personal chauffeurs. Apparently that was not their idea of a good time. I was highly motivated, and I got insanely lucky because one of the amazing ladies at the barn took me under her wing, and for years and years and years to come, she drove me to and from the barn every single day when her and her son went out. So they became like family, and I felt like I'd won the lottery. I loved spending time with them. I loved the freedom of being at the barn and being around the horses, hanging out with my friends, going to camps and shows. I was just a total barn rat from day one. And horses were really my entire world as a kid. And now it's funny because in a totally different way, they really still are. So about a decade ago, I stepped into a new chapter when I bought my first horse, Dillon. Now, having a horse was a lifelong dream of mine, but truthfully, it was not one that I thought I would necessarily achieve. And I remember when I was calling around to countless trainers, and they were literally laughing me off the phone when I gave them my $15,000 budget. I guess horses in BC are a lot more expensive than horses in Nova Scotia. So I ended up searching high and low, and I found my first horse all the way back in Nova Scotia. His name was Dillon, and he had a ton of character. And I actually found him on one of my last trips home to visit my stepdad before he passed away from lung cancer. So I took that as a sign that Dillon was really meant to be mine. And I shipped him all the way back to Victoria, BC to start his new life. So I could barely contain my excitement when I was waiting for him. And he came many days late. And I was standing in the driveway when the trailer pulled in, and the hauler unloaded him as quick as could be, threw the lead line at me, and scoffed and said how dangerous this horse was, how awful he was to transport, how he'd injured her. And then she proceeded to throw all of his stuff out onto the driveway and not say another word to me. And then she took off. And so I was left with this super agitated, skinny, anxious, and very hungry horse, because amongst his stuff was all of the grain that his owners had sent with him. So he had not been fed, and he stepped off the trailer in really bad shape. So I had my work cut out for me from the get-go, but I knew I wanted to make his life as good as it could possibly be. So we started packing him full of groceries, and I dove straight into some research on natural horsemanship, because I realized very quickly that at about 17.1 and kind of pushy that I had some work to do. So needless to say, there were a lot of hurdles, and it all felt really worthwhile until one day Dillon came up lame. And the vet gave me some terrible news. So he actually had a high hind suspensory, and the vet found some scar tissue on the imaging, suggesting that he had probably had a previous injury to that area before that either wasn't diagnosed or treated. So the prognosis was terrible, and euthanasia was the only recommendation that the vet was willing to make. And I just thought, this can't be happening. Like, no way. I just got him. I waited 30 years. So I was absolutely devastated, and I just couldn't bear the thought of losing my boy. And I had just lost my stepdad, and I just knew I had to do everything in my power to try and help him. And I was not ready to say goodbye. So thus began another deep dive. And I started researching all kinds of alternative healing options. So magnetic therapy, laser, back on track. And this was not stuff that was super common 10 years ago. So I really wanted to exhaust all the possibilities to make sure that I was doing everything I could. And in the end, he made a full recovery, which was so cool. And all of that really sparked this passion in me for learning and kind of going against the grain in the horse world. And let's just say that kind of continued. So I ended up being approached by a saddle company and took a job working for them, because I had learned a fair bit about saddle fit when I was rehabbing Dillon. And I thought, yeah, you know what? This might be a cool next step. So off I went to France for training. And let's just say that experience did not pan out quite as I would have hoped. I really quickly realized that that industry was full of tactics and practices that just did not sit well with me. And I was like, I am not going to lie just to make a sale. So I knew there was nothing I was going to be able to do to get on board with the way things were run in this industry. And I knew I had to quit my job. So unfortunately, around this time, Dillon also ended up colicking. And despite doing everything we could to save him, he did not make it. So this was a really tough time. I became really disillusioned with the horse world and everything that kind of went on. I ended up having to move out of my condo that I'd just purchased and renovated. So I was now jobless, horseless, and homeless, and couldn't figure out how my life had taken such a turn. So I totally stepped away from the horse industry for a little while before deciding to start my own business. And that's when Highland Saddles was born. So that was a tough transition, getting back into it after losing Dillon. I worked multiple jobs, teaching lessons, serving, but I really wanted to make sure that I would never be beholden to a brand ever again. And I would never have to make decisions or recommendations based off of pressure from a company that was holding something over my head. So I made that promise, and it has been behind every decision I have made with Highland Saddles ever since. Fast forward a few years, and I couldn't resist the pull of the ponies. So my friend and I concocted a scheme to get ourselves a horse that we were going to share. Now, she had leased Dillon from me, and we were both kind of ready to have a quality horse under us again. The challenge is we didn't actually have any money. So we had slim pickings. And then we found her, our beautiful big Ellie, or the Ellinator, as we used to call her, because she was like the Terminator for your body. And so to say this horse was not straightforward would be an understatement for sure. But I immediately fell in love with her big, beautiful presence. And when I showed up to try her, the saddle they were using was sitting on her withers. And so I asked if I could grab something out of my car that would be a better option instead. And when I pulled the saddle off, she had really deep atrophied pockets behind her shoulders, no muscle. And I was like, oh no, what are we going to do here? So I found something that was significantly better and that I felt like I could try her in. And this poor horse was so stressed and rushed and fast. But I fell in love with her, and I was confident that with proper saddle fit and proper care, I could bring her back. But here's the thing. Ellie then proceeded to go through 13 saddles in a year and a half. Yeah, think about that for a second. So this horse, unfortunately, had zero tolerance for discomfort. And if she was not happy, she made it very clear. So needless to say, I ate a lot of humble pie, and this horse really taught me to become even more patient, even more compassionate, even more understanding, and to ask more questions and really, really think about what she was communicating. So she also really taught me a lot about how trauma can be stored in a horse's body and in their nervous system. And she was a horse that you could not escalate with without totally losing her. So she really got me in touch with my feelings and with emotional regulation practices and energy work and other modalities. And that helped me grow a ton as a horse person. Now, eventually we did have to accept that Ellie maybe was not going to work out as a riding horse. She ended up having multiple bouts with ulcers and cellulitis. And so at 13, we made the really tough decision to retire her, but she went to an amazing home to be a broodmare. And then we started deep diving on breeding and educating ourselves on that and all of the trials and tribulations. And although it was awful to say goodbye to her, it really allowed me to start the next chapter in my equestrian journey, which was starting Lovas Equestrian. I knew that I needed to develop horse-first saddles that were more adjustable, more affordable, more customizable, and that honored everything that I had learned as a fitter in my time with Ellie and with Dillon, really. And to make saddles that truly fit the needs that I was seeing in the community. So saddles that could grow with horses through their rehab journey, for example. And of course, life being what it is, my very first demo saddles arrived just as the pandemic hit. So everything in the world, especially the manufacturers in the UK, shut down, and that's where my saddles were being made. And so I quickly saw this dream come to a screeching halt, really, before it had even started. And fortunately, I am just as stubborn as I am horse obsessed. So I quickly pivoted and started reaching out to other manufacturers and decided, hey, we're going to have to do it another way. And I'd always wanted to make 2 different lines, but this just forced me to do it a little sooner than I had planned. And today, I'm really proud to say that Lovas has over 10 models of different trees, both jump and dressage. And we really made it our mission to help horses and riders find saddles that work for them and will grow with them and meet their needs. So these saddles are really exactly what I wish I had for Ellie and what she needed. and really what I've heard time and time again from clients that they needed for their horses. So it's been a fabulous and fascinating journey. And over the years, I've really chased every opportunity to learn and invest in my skill set, whether it is various modalities of body work, energy work, masterson, natural horsemanship practices, just finding ways to connect with the horse and understand what is going on for them in their bodies, in their minds, in their nervous systems. And the hardest part of this industry is that there's so much gatekeeping and there's so much kind of inclination to stick to the way things have always been done. And there tends to be a lot of resistance to change. So that's really why I wanted to start this podcast. I want to give you guys a peek behind the curtains where you can hear ideas shared openly amongst professionals. You can hear the types of conversations that maybe aren't happening in your barn. Because I'm a firm believer that frustration starts where knowledge ends. And I see so many riders struggling with frustrations simply because nobody's sharing this information. Nobody is telling them the things that they need to hear. And so we want to offer you the resources to help your horse and to maybe help put your mind at ease. So whether you're a casual rider or a show ring regular or anywhere in between, this podcast is going to be for you. Stick with us because we're going to dig into a whole bunch of big questions. We're going to question old assumptions, and we're going to introduce new thoughts, new ideas, and different ways of looking at problems that you might be facing with your horse. You're going to get a peek through the lens of countless different equestrian professionals and hopefully get a better understanding of your horse, the sport, and yourself as we go along the journey. So thank you so much for being here. We're at the very beginning, and I can't wait to share this process with you. And please, if there's anything that you see in any of our episodes that you notice helps you or your horse, share it, right? We need more information and access to knowledge that's helpful. So we can't wait to get started. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Unbridled Equestrian Podcast. Let's go.